Good afternoon for those who are in afternoons hours. Good morning for those who are in the morning hours. Good evening, as well. Some of our presenters they are 9 p.m. I guess by that time. I am based in the Washington D.C. area, so it's a good morning for me. My name is Osvaldo Montoya, and I work for the Men Engaged Global Secretariat. I'm very happy to be the host, moderator for this important session on male involvement in gender-based violence. I want to thank our panelists, our presenters. It's so good to see you here. I'm seeing that some people are saying hello in the chat. You can do that. I read greetings to everyone from Berlin. That's great. This session is comprised of 3 presentations. We have with us the Executive Director of the WWP, Alessandra Pauncz. I'm sorry, I might mispronouncing your name. And her presentation is on the silent, invisible frontiers of new threats in domestic violence, stalker, ware, and cyber violence. Such an important area that we need to learn more and know how to respond to this expression of violence. We also will hear from Marcela Francis Lungu, who is from Tanzania, and she's going to present the role of men in ending gender-based violence, a case study of Tanzania. Thank you, Marcela, for preparing this presentation. And finally, we will hear from Dr. Fang sorry for mispronouncing probably. His presentations is on men engagement in gender-based violence prevention and response in China, practices and experiences in China. That's such an important presentation that we many of us want to learn more about how this important work is taking in countries all over the world, and particularly in China, which we need to learn more about all the great work that you are doing there. We will go in the order I mentioned our presenters. Each of them will have about 20 minutes for the presentation. If you have an immediate question, you can put your question in the chat, and also we can allow a couple of minutes if someone have a question, not a comment. After they finish the 3 of them are done with their presentation, we'll open the room, the space for comments and further questions and for engaging with our panelists as well. So thank you again. And this is one of our parallel sessions in the Men Engaged Ubuntu Symposium, which means there are other parallel sessions happening at the same time. We encourage you to follow us in our platforms. This also is going to be recorded, and we will share the recording afterwards. And then we will provide more information about the Ubuntu Symposium and the upcoming sessions. I hope I am providing the basics for this session, and without further ado, I'll pass on to Alessandra for her presentation.
Thank you, Osvaldo. It's a pleasure being here with you today. I'm particularly excited about learning more about the work that's being doing in different parts of the world, in Tanzania and China. So it's very exciting and interesting. And so I will start with a little bit of information on the organization that I represent, and then I will be talking a little bit about cyber violence, specifically with a focus on also stalkerware and some of the materials and ideas that we are developing around this new threat in terms of violence, domestic violence, violence against women, gender-based violence, and intervention. The network that I represent is a European network composed of more than 60 organizations from more than 30 European countries. The organizations are mostly organizations working with perpetrators of domestic violence, but also with victims. So we have women's support services, we have perpetrator programs, we also have networks of organizations, umbrella organizations, and some research departments. There are different kinds of membership, and all of these organizations come together. They came together informally in 2009 to 2014. That was sort of the year that we formalized the organization. As a network, obviously we are continuously reflecting on the work that we do, and as an overarching organization, we try and provide support about what it is that is important in working with perpetrators, how perpetrator programs should fit into a community response to violence, actually also what perpetrator programs are, what we do, so sort of general information. We also have a very strong link to the general working against violence against women with a gendered perspective within the framework of the Istanbul Convention. So we feel that we need to support an accountability-centered approach to stopping men's violence, but also an approach that poses up as a priority and as a center of the work, the safety of the victims of violence, so women and children. Also, the working in close collaboration with women's support services. Also providing resources, knowledge, networking experience for members, guidelines, support. If you are interested in all the activities of the network, I strongly encourage you to look at our website. I will give you the references at the end of the presentation. So let's dive into the specific topic of today, which is new threats, and specifically how gender-based violence is relevant when working in cyber violence, and why cyber violence is important when working in gender-based violence. What are the links? If and why do we need specific resources for addressing stalkerware and cyber violence? Why we need collaboration, not only among perpetrator programs, but also with women's support services and tech companies to further our knowledge on this, and important areas in which we need to look for legal change and social, not only social change, but also legal change, because there are some very dangerous areas that are currently not regulated. I'm going to make reference to the definition of violence against women of the Istanbul Convention, Article 3, because I would like to insert cyberviolence within the violation of human rights defined by the Istanbul Convention. So for the Istanbul Convention, violence against women is designed as a violation of human rights and a form of discrimination against women that includes all acts of gender-based violence that result in or are likely to result in. This is important because in the definition of violence, there is not only the acts of violence themselves, but also threats, as we see further along in the definition, and acts that could result. And this is very important as we move into the virtual area, it's very important to keep this in mind, that acts of threat and also potential intentions on resulting in harm are as important in the Istanbul Convention as the acts of violence themselves. On the other hand, cyberviolence is defined as online access to and distributing of offensive, violent, or dangerous materials with the objective of causing emotional, psychological, or physical damage. Another concept that we think is really important to show the continuity that there is within domestic violence with cyber violence is the concept of coercive control that many of you are probably very familiar with, and that is quite central to the definition of domestic violence. It is a form of psychological abuse in intimate relationships that leads a person to fear that violence will be used against them, or that causes severe emotional distress, and that impacts all the day-to-day activities, and is manifested as a pattern of intimidation, humiliation, that can be identifiable as psychological or emotional abuse. So it's a variation, very different kinds of forms of psychological abuse that lead to a situation in which there is substantial adverse effect, and the area of action of the victim is strongly reduced. So what are we talking about when we're talking about cyber violence? What are some examples, just so we start understanding what we're talking about? For example, in some cases, the man saves his partner's WhatsApp web login on his computer, and every day he checks her conversations without her knowledge. So that could be, sorry, I skipped ahead, I was looking at the examples. Or threatening his ex-partner that if she doesn't sleep with him, he will post nude images online that she sent him in the past. So this is another form of cyber violence, threats. Creating a fake profile on Instagram to write to the ex-partner, posing as another person with the aim of getting her back. This is another form of cyber violence. Installing the bank app with the partner's data on the phone so that he can check expenses and earnings is a form of economic abuse, and always within the category of cyber violence. So what are these forms of cyber violence? These are a series of examples, and I will explain briefly the different ones, and then I will focus on a specific form of cyber violence that is stalkerware. So these are different kinds of cyber violence that we saw before. For example, monitoring, tracking, which uses technology to monitor the partner's activities, social interaction, and movement. This is the area within stalkerware goes into, and that I will be talking about a little bit more in this presentation. Doxing is sharing recognizable and often private information about a person's name, phone number online, and then often stalking or threatening her. Identity theft, stealing the partner identity or making debts in her name. Slander, damaging someone's reputation by making false statements about them, sending threatening or offensive messages, or spreading rumors via social media. Hacking or cracking, accessing communication and data storage online. Sexting, which is sending, receiving, or sharing via phone, internet, sexually explicit videos or images of naked people. It can be primary, done directly, or secondary, sending photos and information of somebody else. There's also creep shop voyeurism, which is taking non-consensual pictures or videos of a partner or other unknown women's intimate body parts, and then sometimes sharing them online. So in terms of categories, we have 3 macro areas. As I was mentioning before, one is cyber stalking, which has within it all forms of online stalking, controlling emails, texting, publishing offensive comments, sharing intimate photos or videos. Or another category is that of non-consensual sharing of images, and that's, as we said before, sextortion, so even threatening to public images that naked images of a partner if she doesn't do what one's requested, or revenge porn, also asking or threatening to divulgate materials after the breakup. With cyber harassment, there are various forms. There's cyberbullying, there's threats of violence, using sexist jokes, and human trafficking and child pornography. Some of these, as we know, are legal, although very unpleasant and very negative, like, for example, publishing offensive comments on internet forums. Other ones are blatantly illegal, like child pornography or human trafficking, but there's definitely a huge continuum of very damaging behaviors that real forms of violence that are happening in the cyberspace. And with the pandemic, with the switching of so many activities online, there has been an increase. I will give you some of the numbers of the dissemination of stalkerware, and it's really quite shocking. So what is stalkerware? Stalkerware is software that is can be installed on the partner's telephone or tablet or other devices without her knowledge. And that allows the person that has installed the software to see pictures, read text, read all kinds of social media information, obtain recordings of calls, access camera and microphones, see locations of where a person is. These softwares are advertised online. They're extremely easy to access, and that's one of the, when I was mentioning before that there is some illegal areas that are very, it's scary that it's so open. This is what I was referring to. So under the guise of parent control or employer control, it's publicized in this way. Sometimes it's specifically publicized to control your partner. So there is advertising that is specifically targeted to this. However, there are relevant differences between parent control and this kind of malicious stalkerware, because parent control is explicit on the device, and it gives warning that the person is being controlled, while stalkerware and malicious stalkerware does not inform the person that is being stalked. It is necessary to have physical access to the phone, but obviously if you're living with your partner, that isn't so difficult. The price of this is it's like a service that is bought through this software downloading, and this is the average price per month for using a stalkerware application, so it's extremely cheap. How is it installed? There are specifically landing pages that explain how to do it. There is customer support to help people install it. And there is also the possibility of buying phones that have pre-installed information. For example, this is an ad of this FlexiSpy. And as you can see, if it's too complicated to actually download the software, you can buy a phone with FlexB Stall pre-installed. So this is very, very scary, and this is what is easily out there. This is only a partial number of the stalkerwares of the first 8 months of 2019. It's a very partial number because it has been detected only by Kaspersky, that is engaged with us in a coalition against stalkerware. They have been very active in contrasting this phenomena. And so very good at detecting it, but that's only one of the providers that are able to give us sort of some data on how much of this is happening right now. This is the numbers for Europe, and as you see, Germany and Italy are among the highest consumers. Again, this is a partial number that comes from Kaspersky, but as you see, it is frequent even in Spain, France, United Kingdom. So this is definitely a growing phenomenon. We published a small book that you can find on our website that explains in more detail some of this information that I've just sort of quickly browsed through, because today we don't have much time. We also have been providing some webinars and some information. The interesting thing of this manual, it's just a little booklet, is that we also have some information on working with men that are using cyberviolence. This is because we realized that most of our service providers, most of the people in our network that are working with perpetrators, the service providers didn't have any idea of what was happening, of the use that men were doing of this. So we felt that it was necessary to provide more information on what is happening and on the different forms of ways of working, of screening for cyberviolence, and for actually providing materials in groups for addressing the issue with men. This is part of what we have been doing. Also, collaboration with victim support services to understand to continue to monitor what the impact and outcome is for victims. There's some references here in terms of additional materials that you can find on our website. And I think I am going to stop here because it should more or less be within the time frame that we have decided. But then if maybe there's a little bit more time, I can answer some questions, or we can go into more detail of some of the issues. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Alessandra. This is really an eye-opener for many of us who have not been exposed to this form of violence. It's really, really troubling to realize how, as you said in your material, how the same violence is now using new tools, new ways of really attacking the human dignity of women and other people in situation of oppression and discrimination. There are some questions. We have 1 minute, 1 minute left. Thank you for being so great with your time. One of the questions for you is, how can women check whether stalkerware is installed on their phone, tab, or desk phone, and can one delete it when it is installed by other person?
Okay, so the issue around what to do in these cases is very relevant. We have a website with the coalition that that gives more information on this. We're always very cautious on the issue of removing stalkerware for several reasons. You need to have an evaluation of the risk, a risk assessment for the victim, because often if the victim removes the stalkerware, there is an alarm that goes off to the perpetrator. So he would be informed, and so you would have to make sure that it is safe to do so. It's obviously possible, not easy, because it is a malicious form of software. So it's not like one of the apps that you can sort of see on your phone and it comes out. It hides. It's rather complicated sometimes to find it. There are some indicators. For example, a very high battery consumption is one of the indicators. Usually women realize also because the partner has information and knows things about where she's been, what she said, the communication that she had on her phone. So we recommend that if a woman suspects that there's stalkerware on her phone, she get into contact with the Women's Support Service, and she gathers correct information also from the tech companies that are like Kaspersky are able to provide support for this. And on the coalition's web page, you will find videos and a lot more information on this.
Thank you for those guidance. There is one more question, but I'll leave it by the end. And the second question, which actually is the first one, is more a conceptual question that you can read in the chat and then prepare for a response when we go after the other two panelists. Thank you so much again, Alessandra.
Okay.
And now I have the pleasure to introduce Marcela. Marcela, who is from Tanzania, Marcela Francis Lungu. She is going to present about the role of men in ending gender-based violence in Tanzania. And Marcela works for a non-governmental organization in Tanzania that promotes gender equality and women's empowerment. Is that TIVA, correct, Marcela? She can explain us a little more about her organizations. And over to you, Marcela. Over to you, Marcela. If you can adjust a little bit your camera to see your face. That's much better now. Thank you.
Yeah. Hello, everybody. This is Marcela speaking. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. I'm representing from Tanzania, East Africa. I'm representing an organization called TIBA. TIBA is a non-profit organization working towards improving the life of women, children, and youth, but mostly with through ensuring that we promote issues of gender equality and women empowerment, but also strive to ensure that there's access of education to a girl child and a child with disability, but also focusing on the issues of impacting the issues of how climate change and environment affects women and children. But not only that, but also TIBA strive to provide or advocate for issues of sexual reproductive health among youth. TIBA works is a member of number of networking organizations or networks, including Men Engaged Tanzania, which is the front row Men Engaged network, which brings together a number of CSOs working towards issues of men engaged. But also we are a member of the GBV Prevention Network, which is the regional network working towards ending issues of gender-based violence. And we're also a member of Girls Not Bride, which is the member organization that works towards, it's a global organization works towards ending issues of child marriage and other networking organizations. However, you can access us through the number of social media networks that is shown. Can you see my screen? Hello, also?
Yes, we can see your screen.
Okay, thank you very much. You can access us through the number of social media networks that we are on. We are on Facebook, we're on Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, and LinkedIn. TIBA's base beneficiaries are women, youth, and children, as I said, Priyo. but focusing on working at the community level. Our work is based on ensuring that we include communities from designing of the project, but also in implementation of the projects. That's why most of our programs have been very sustainable, since we most of the time we ensure that a community is part of that program. Now back to what we do. The project, Tiba had a pilot project. Actually, it's an ongoing project on engaging men and boys in ending gender-based violence, which is a project that was implemented in in Tanzania, Dar es Salaam, focusing on Kinondoni district, covering 2 wards, with the main goal on how men and boys can be agents of change towards issues of gender and development programs. And on this project, the approach that was used is the dialogue at the community coffee hubs. What are these community coffee hubs? Mostly, actually, now we'll talk about the example from Tanzania. Tanzania in the coast region, we have the existing community coffee hubs. These are the hubs where mostly they mostly occur maybe from in the morning, or some of them takes place during the evening, where mostly men meet after work, where the men meet and discuss about the number of issues. But most of these discussions in these hubs are most on the issues of sports, the issues, the main issues, the issues of sports, the issues of development, but rather on these places, you will find that there's an issues of gender being discussed, or issues of gender-based violence being discussed. But they're almost everywhere. These community coffee hubs. There are free hubs where people can join in and drink coffee, where there's a man, mostly the old man is there selling the coffee, but also the other people comes in, the other men comes in, and they buy the coffee and the snacks, but also they talk about the issues. Mostly they talk about the sports. Now, since these hubs exist in our community, that's when in 2018, Tiba thought that how can we use men as agents of change? Not only that, but also where can we get men and have a space to talk about issues of gender-based violence? Because in 2018, among the challenges among the gap that was presented towards the implementation of issues of ending violence, gender-based violence in Tanzania, was the gap of men engaged on the issues of gender-based violence. So for us, that was a gap that we decided to work on. So we looked at the number of hubs. That's where we came did a bit of survey on the coffee hubs. That's when we started engaging men. How did we start engaging these men? Actually, as we all know, in Africa, in men hubs, you'll never find them talk about women issues. So at least, at first, it was not that easy of engagement. But the first dialogue that we did, where we first of all we introduced the issues of GBV to the community. Not only that, but we introduced the issues of GBV to the community leaders, that this is what we do. We want to bring up this discussion to these men hubs, to these coffee hubs. And so when we do the discussion, most of the time we engage the community leaders. They are part of the discussion. Not only that, but also we making sure that all coffee hub, there is that an old man, there's that man selling the coffee. That we make sure that we impact that man before with the knowledge of GBV, so that they can allow us to have space to come and talk to other men. So we engage the community leaders, we engage the man selling the coffee, so that at the end of the day, they give us space to talk about the issues of GBV. Now, during the discussion, now you find that men talk about the number of issues. Men come up with the number of issues. Not only men, but at these coffee hubs, there are also boys being part of the coffee hubs. But now there are more men than boys, but also we have a bit of other men at the hubs. So men are disclosed number of issues of GBV. But not only that, but also they all want each other. This is what this man is also doing. This is what we see this one is doing. So at the end of the day, we identify the type of people who can be the type of men and boys who can still champion for these issues of gender-based violence. Now, after identifying the champion, that is where we do the refresher session with them to have a bit knowledge about the issues of gender-based violence and gender equality in general, but also the package of women and girls empowerment. Now, when we develop this. Now, at the end of the day, we develop some action plan that where they go back to their community and they advocate and voice out for issues of gender-based violence. And the program have been very successful, actually. It's a pilot project, but it's still an ongoing project. It has been very successful. We have a number of champions that are still working. At the community level. Now, what is this? When we do all this, what is this contributing to? Our program on engaging men and boys is contributing to global. The Sustainable Development Goal number 5. But at the country level, in Tanzania, we have the existing national plan of action to end violence against women and children, which has the package of thematic area number 3, which calls for issues of safe environment in the public places. Now, when we talk about the coffee hubs, these are public places where men meet, but also there are other women selling they're selling things besides. Now, how safe are they? Can they talk about the issues of GBV? But not only that, as we all know, when we talk about gender-based violence, we're talking about 2 genders here. We're talking about male and female. Now, the coffee hubs we have turned the coffee hubs in the places where also men are free to talk about the issues of GBV. They are free to ask more questions about issues of GBV. For instance, the questions of where can we report as men? Where can men talk about these issues? How can I handle these GBV issues when they happen at the family level and at the community level? And towards the implementation of the project, there has been a number of I've just tried to summarize them in pictures so that they can bring more of so that people can see more of what we do. The first picture, those are one of the male champions participating in the International Girl Child this year. Excuse me. Not only that, but also during COVID-19, we did the virtual men engage dialogue. Now, we did the virtual men engage dialogue where the male champions that participated together with us, we did the virtual men engage platform so that we look at the issues. How is the GBV? We look at the issues of how is the GBV at the community level during the COVID-19, and that was very successful. But also still reaching out to them, as you can see the other picture. To me, it's at the right. That's one of the men's hub where we engage them and talk about the issues. Actually, when you go to these hubs, we want to hear more from them. Like, what are the issues and what is your role as a man? And this is that's the other hub where we engage men. And the good thing about all this, we did the media campaign. The dialogues we are continuing at the hubs. We had the social media campaign going on where we would campaign about the number of issues raised by men during the dialogue. But not only that, we engaged a number of the media who reported about the issues of gender-based violence disclosed by men at these community coffee hubs. But at the end of the day, as I've all said, we mostly engage the community leaders, actually from the government, that's the local government authority, for the ownership and sustainability of this program. All we wanted was men to be part of the front row of ensuring that the community are safe, or the women are safe from issues of gender-based violence. So we engaged most of that. We engaged the leaders to know what are we doing exactly, and what's the importance of engaging men, ensuring that there's a decrease of issues of gender-based violence. Now, what has been the achievement so far on our pilot project on engaging men and boys in ending gender-based violence? During the implementation of the projects in the 2 words, the pilot in 2 words, there have been 12 news or stories produced by journalists. And not only that, but these, as we said, these male gender champions. The male gender champions participated in the radio and TV stations to advocate or to tell the world what has been for them to be champions on the issues of gender-based violence. But also, we are able to generate the journalists who are now men engaged, championing, but also the social media influencers who will definitely campaigning for the issues of men engaged on the issues of gender-based violence. Throughout the implementation, we were able to reach out to 2,500 males so far. it's a continuing, it's still continuing. But also 200 women, as I've said, when we go to these coffee hubs, there are other women besides the coffee hubs selling selling their snacks, selling other issues, doing other entrepreneurship. Now we're also trying to engage those women in these dialogues. Actually, in Tanzania, when you go to these hubs, they'll definitely tell you women are not allowed to be part of these hubs. These hubs belongs to us. But for us as TIBA, we went on and said that we are breaking these taboos. We are coming here to bring in the issues of gender-based violence, could be part, and women empowerment agenda, so that you men can see that women can also be part of these discussions. Gender-based violence agenda can also be part of discussion. But we will also be able to develop our 55 champions. But currently we have other 16 added champions in other districts. And not only that, I've said before, they have been ongoing while the dialogues are going on. There have been number of social media campaigns on the issues of engaging men and boys in ending violence against women and children, but also in ending gender-based violence. And with that, TIBA was able to, the program was recognized as among the best community engagement approach, the best community engagement approach, by making sure that men are not left behind in the fight against gender-based violence. And that was very quick and short. I hope my presentation is very informative. Thank you very much. Also, back to you.
Thank you, Marcela. It's really amazing all that you have been doing.
Thank you very much.
With men and boys in Tanzania through this community-based intervention, this community coffee hubs. That's very, very, it sounds like a very innovative approach. And thank you also for taking the time. Also great time management in your presentation. So we
thank you very much.
We can have a few minutes if some people have questions about Marcela's presentation. Now, also you can raise your question later after the three presenters do their presentation. But if you have a burning question right now to Marcela, we can go ahead with it right now. For instance, the expression of male gender champions is something that came to me. There is a question here from Gerardo, who is thanking you, Marcela, and Gerardo wrote, you mentioned this was a pilot program. Can you speak to proposed expansion and sustainability to this? What happened after the pilot?
Thank you very much for the good question. Actually, I said it was a pilot in that area has been shifted to other districts as well. So it's still a continued project.
Okay, thank you. Marcela, women of what age group are covered in the pilot? It's another question from Sabita. What age?
Thank you very much. Mostly, most of these women around are the women around the age of 35, because most of these are the women that sit besides the coffee hubs where they sell these snacks and other entrepreneurship, 35 and above.
So 35 years old and older.
Yes, the working group.
All right. Well, thank you. We will continue now. Now we're going to continue with Dr. Fang from China. He's a long-time ally to women's empowerment, women's rights in China, working with other men. He's a part of the China White Ribbon Volunteer Network, which is part of the International White Ribbon Campaign, and that was established in 2010. They established a hotline in 2010, and their main goal is to advocate male participation and promote gender equality. So Dr. Fang will also be accompanied by Ren from who is going to support him in the translation from interpretation to English. So thank you also, and welcome, Ren, for your support in this presentation.
Thank you. Thank you.
好，那我开始了。很高兴有这样一个机会来跟各位分享一些我们在中国从事的工作哈。中国白丝带志愿者网络项目呢，我们发起10年前。实际上呢，从最早2001年的时候，中国就有一些学者和社会活动家呢，他们开始了一些关于性别平等的这样的一些个工作，包括推动男性参与啊，一些白丝带运动的倡导的工作。在2010年，我们成立了白丝带热线。这个时候呢，就是由这里开始持续的，有一个团体进行的这样的男性参与工作，算正式启动了啊，任老师。
Okay, thank you. Thank you for all the participants, and it's my great honor to be here to share our work in China in male involvement. As introduced by the moderator, actually in China, the concept of male involvement was introduced in China in 2001, starting from as scholars and experts. And then from male involvement, real interventions actually only start in 2010. The White Ribbon Hotline was set up in 2010. And then since then, we have started the systematic interventions on male involvement.
好的，然后在2011年，我们和联合国人口基金北京代表处完成了一个项目，就是男性气质与性别暴力的研究。这是中国第一次针对男性气质的一个和家暴、性别暴力有关的一个调查。到了2013年，联合国人口基金就支持中国白丝带志愿者网络项目成立。任老师。
I would just so in 2000 we got a lot of great support from United Nations Population Fund. So in 2011, actually we are involved in the research on gender-based violence and menslessness funded by UNIP. This is the first ever such kind of research in China. And then in 2013, based on this research, the support by UNIPA, the China White Ribbon Volunteer Network Program was launched.
这就是我在过去这10年左右的时间里呢，我们白丝带志愿者网络有了很大的发展。到了今年的1月底，我们已经有4100多名志愿者在84个城市成立了地方的服务站。然后呢，这就是我们一些地方服务站的一些风采哈。这是包括这里一些这张照片的左上角的照片呢，是一些父亲他们穿着这样的这个小天鹅的裙子跳舞哈，还有一些人呢，就是通过跑马拉松的形式来宣传男性参与的这样一些理念。任老师。
Since 2013, the China White Ribbon Network has much developed. Almost 10 years journey, and so far we have around 4,100 promisers who promised to zero tolerance to GBV, and also we set up they called local stations in 84 cities in China. And quite a lot of activities have been conducted. You can see the photos showing the activities, some of our activities. On the top left, you can see that's actually the fathers. They're dancing, they're dressing, and they're dancing. And then the one on the lower side, that is also our volunteers. They are running in the city to have these campaigns on GBV and male involvement.
这些照片也是一些地方服务站服务的照片，我们这里就不多说了。这里有一位，这张照片呢，这个左面呢，这个男子叫顾伟，他原来是一位家庭暴力的施暴者，后来呢，他这几张照片都是顾伟的，后来呢，他现在成为了我们的一个地方服务站的负责人，成立一个反家暴的积极的活动的志愿者。
So the service stations, they have conducted different types of activities at community levels. So there are so many photos, but I would like to draw your attention to this one. This is a person in these photos. His name is Gu Wei. He was a perpetrators before, and after the counseling and the service support and training, and now he became a very good GBV anti-GBV champions in our network.
这是我们白丝带志愿者网络每年都会组织一些培训并且每年都会召开一次全国性的会议。这也是我们一些会议的一些照片。逐渐的呢，我们形成了自己的3个主要的工作体系，一个是宣传倡导，一个是咨询辅导一个是青少年教育。任老师。
So actually, we also conducted capacity building for the volunteers, and actually we conducted different kinds of training courses, and every year there will be annual review meeting of the China White Ribbon, and people come together to share experiences and good practices. So this is the photos of these annual meetings. 方老师再到那个3个策略 ，sorry。
对，我现在到那3个策略就宣传倡导、咨询。
Yes. So this is our 3 major program areas. First is advocacy and communication. Second is counseling services, and third is youth education.
在宣传倡导领域，我们做的一些比较有影响的活动，比如有一个男人讲故事。这个活动呢，我们当时找了10多位，他们是具有性别平等意识的男人。来自于各个领域，比如说有学者，那么也有家庭主妇，还有这个中国的第一个男护士，等等他们来分享他们不一样的性别的历程。这个活动在当时蛮有影响的。任老师。
For the advocacy and communication, I would like to introduce some interesting examples. First is a very big, interesting is a men's story. So we invited around more than 10 men in China to share their stories, to talk about their understanding of gender and gender equality, which including like researchers, not only researchers, but also some real workers, like the first male nurse in China. Also joined and share his stories.
这是我们的另外一个活动，我们称之为好父亲好伴侣男性成长工作坊。在这个工作坊上面呢，我们就培训男人如何做父亲做不一样的反传统的父亲这个工作坊当时有300多家国内的媒体中国的媒体报道。还有英国的媒体报道，还是蛮有影响的一个活动。
This is another activity for advocacy. That is, we conduct this workshop on good partner and good father. This is a training for men how to be a good father, good partner, which draw a lot of media's attention.
这是我们还组织过一次白丝带电影节。当时我们选择了64部电影，从不同的角度呢来讨论性别暴力的。然后我们有40多个城市组织了这样的电影放映活动，来宣传反对性别暴力的理念，推动男性参与。
We also organized the White Ribbon Film Festivals. Actually, just broadcast the films to anti-gender-based violence, which are already conducted in around 40 cities in China and increased quite a lot of public awareness.
我们在2018年呢排演了一部话剧，叫燕京独白这个我们是仿照美国著名的女权主义名剧《阴道独白》，我们也是男人分享燕京的故事，主要是从这个角度来分享，来反思性别暴力。
And in 2018, we developed and performed a drama with the title Penis Monologue, which actually the ideas come from the vagina monologue from the United States, and this is from the men's point of view to talk about their stories, their understanding of gender and male involvement, and also GBV.
这是也有许多的当地的国内的各种媒体来报道我们的工作。另外呢，我们还有呢，我们做的一个很重要的工作呢，就是进入社区的宣传倡导，开展一些讲座，这个任老师您简单说一下就可以了。还有街头的倡导等等，带一两句就 OK。
And also we have quite a lot of communication campaigns through the media, like radio and TV program and newspapers. And also we have conducted some community-based campaigns and information and education program. You can see this is in the local communities. We have the posters there, and sometimes we also have the community-based lectures.
我们做的，我个人认为呢，最重要的一项工作呢，就是我们在心理咨询辅导的领域来做的工作。比如说，我们有一条白丝带热线，现在我们这条热线呢，已经用这个微信的形式来做了哈。另外呢，在这里呢，我们在2014年和2016年呢，我们组织了原生家庭目击暴力者小组，这是中国呢最早的针对原生家庭目击暴力者的小组啊。然后呢，我们在2019年到2020年呢，还组织了家庭暴力施暴者的团体辅导小组，这也是中国在2016年颁布反家庭暴力法之后的第一个施暴者小组。因为中国和美国一些西方国家不一样，我们的法律当中没有针对施暴者辅导的法律，所以呢，成立这样的小组是蛮困难的一个挑战。任老师。
And then now we have come to the second key working areas, that is counseling services. And then, we continued our hotline, China White Ribbon Hotline. And now we open the account in the social media, WeChat in China, which much popular. And also we have conducted another good training is witness to violence by members in groups from the family of origin, 2014 and 2016. Another good, that's also the ever first one. 方老师下一张。
是这样吗？家暴施暴者吗？
Yeah. This is the 2018 and 2020. We conducted the workshop for the perpetrators, and this is the first such kind of training workshop in China, because it's even the anti-domestic violence law was come into effect in 2016 in China, but there are very few the rules or regulations, etc., targeting the perpetrators training and etc. So this is the first such kind of program in China.
我们在过去几年呢，每年在3个省中国一共有30多个省，我们每年在3个省呢做反家暴的这个心理咨询师的能力的培训，每次培训都有100多人。现在我们到今年呢，就将一共完成12个省的这样的培训。
And then, in China, we have in the mainland we have 30 provinces, and during past 3 years, we have conducted three provinces every year. We conducted training for the counseling training for the psychologists on GBV.
另外呢，我们开展的一个工作呢，就是青少年教育哈。我们现在把反家暴的一些工作呢纳入到青少年的教育当中。我们自己呢，比如说我们有一个猫头鹰性教育营，在这个性教育营当中呢，我们主要的是讲性教育，防范性别暴力，但是呢，我们也会涉及到家庭暴力的内容，把这个防止性别暴力和这个防止家庭暴力纳入青少年的性教育当中，这也是我们的一个非常独特的贡献或者说创造。任老师。
The third working area is actually we integrated male involvement and the prevention of gender-based violence into the sexuality education for young people and adolescents. I think we developed a lot of camp for sexuality education. This is one of our key advantages, I think.
这是我们在全国各地开过这样性教育营的一些城市一些有点的一些城市。另外呢，我们也会组织一些家庭暴力性别暴力相关的读书会和讲座，还有工作坊。任老师。
You can see, 要不方老师看那张地图吧。You can see our sexuality education camps have been covered many cities in China, and we also have some other types of education. Yeah, this is the map showing the cities have this sexuality education camps targeting the adolescents and young people, and we also have other kind of like lectures or workshops, etc. 好了，方老师。
好，然后就介绍一下后边吧。好，所以呢，在2018年5月到2021年1月份这段时间呢，我们讲课影响的人数已经达到了700多万人啊，包括网络课程的受众。
This is the number of beneficiaries for our sexuality education. It's almost more than 8 million populations, including because we have both offline and online training course.
我们还拍演了一些性教育的话剧，成长故事。我们这部话剧呢，也在5个城市演出。这个话剧当中呢，也有很多反思家庭暴力，包括父母对孩子的暴力的这样一些内容。任老师，
We also have the dramas on sexuality education, which have already performed in 5 cities in China, including Beijing, Shanghai, Shenzhen, Guangzhou. This is targeted adolescents sexual education, but included domestic violence already covered.
我们还拍了5部微电影和6部公益广告。这些广告当中呢，有的就是直接关于性别暴力的哈，反对性别暴力的。你说，可以了。
We also, we also in drama, not only drama, we also have developed micro movies and also public advertisements, the short videos on sexual education.
这是我们出版的一些关于性教育的图书。这里面有这一套性教育书里面呢，有3本是关于家庭暴力的。其中这3本绘本里面呢。这3本绘本是关于家庭暴力的，其中这个爸爸妈妈不住在一起呢，就是用我们前面讲的那个顾伟哈，直接介绍的顾伟的真实的和他儿子真实的生命故事。
And this, we also developed quite a number of publications and also booklets targeting the adolescent young people, and some father and mother do not live together. This is actually come from the real story from the perpetrators, Mr. Gu Wei's story.
好，这就是我们出版的其他一些图书。另外呢，这是我们未来的一些工作展望啊，我们会继续呢在心理咨询的领域和性教育的领域当中继续借助我们已有的优势吧，继续工作。然后呢，也会继续在这个宣传倡导作为一个日常的工作。任老师。
So this is for the vision. We will continue to continue our counseling services and also continue sexuality education, and advocacy and communication will become the integrated part of our daily work.
好，这是我们的支持过我们的机构，谢谢大家，谢谢。
That's all our funding donors. Thank you for your listening. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Fang. Thank you also, Ren, for helping in understanding this amazing work that has been conducted in China. It's really, really impressive to see how comprehensive is your program for engaging men in China to be, along with women, an agent of change for peace, for equality. So many things I'm sure there might be so many questions and more.
您和您的发言让我们了解了对中国。
I also see some interesting similarities between the experience in Tanzania, the experience in China, in terms of creative ways to attract men and young men and boys on these efforts, on changing, on transforming their own identities and committing to to peaceful and fair relationships among themselves and with women. So if there are specific questions right now for Dr. Fang about the experience that he presented, the comprehensive experience on advocacy and communication, counseling services, youth education, so many great activities they are doing. Is there any question for him? Oh, Alessandra, please.
Yes. I wanted to ask a little bit more information because I didn't understand so well a few questions I had. One question was, you mentioned the white ribbon hotline. So hotline means that people call. What kind of questions do they have? What kind of services do you offer through this hotline?
孟老师有个问题问您啊，他说您提到了白丝带热线，能不能具体说一下，就是这个白丝带热线是怎么运作的，能够提供什么样的服务，什么人打这些电话？
好的，白丝带热线呢，我们最早是一部手机，因为手机比较方便在不同的志愿者当中来回传递。最近1年呢，我们改成了微信的形式，因为微信更方便咨询人来咨询。那么我们倡导的是白丝带热线成立的时候，我们说是白丝带男性热线，我们特别鼓励男性来参与咨询哈。当然这里面呢，最后来咨询呢还是以女性受暴者为主，但是也有男性施暴者。我们大约有15%的来电人是男性的施暴者，包括我前面提到那个顾伟哈，他就是拨打我们白丝带热线，后来呢成为白丝带志愿者。任老师，
还问您提供什么服务？没事，待会儿再说吧。我先
服务就是我们是比较全面的，针对施暴者的扭转的心理服务，还有那个针对受暴者的那个心理帮助。就是因为我们的热线的接线员都是资深的心理咨询师，他们都是有300个小时以上咨询经验的国家2级的心理咨询师，又经过反家暴的专业的培训。所以其实是一个心理学的专业的热线吧。
Okay, so thank you, Alessandra, for your questions. Actually, the China White Ribbon Hotline was set up in 2010, and first it's a mobile phone number, and later we expanded to a WeChat account, a social media account, and for the people called, I think the initial thinking we call the white ribbon hotlines. It's mainly targeting the men, and also including the perpetrators. But actually, 85% of the people called using this hotline is female. It's most of them, they are victims of the domestic violence or gender-based violence, and 15% are men, including the perpetrators. The one I mentioned, the champion of us is actually one of the caller before. For the service we provided, actually we have the very skilled and psychologists who provided counseling through the hotline for these people, and they should have at least 3 hours experiences, and also have been trained on the GBV and also domestic violence, etc. And I think that's what we did for this hotline service.
Great. I see a hand raised by the name here is Humbleness. I'm not sure if that's the name, but if the person with the humbleness wants to raise a question, please, you can go ahead. You need to unmute yourself. Maybe. Oh, here it is.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me? Yes, this is Humbleness from Zambia. I love the presentation from Dr. Fang from China. And my question is, I've seen that they've had a lot of activities for gender-based violence to sensitize men on the dangers and the the programs they have for GBV. Now, my question is, have they seen any reduction on GBV cases since that come up with these programs and since the hotline was introduced? Have they received a lot of cases for GBV? Thank you.
Thank you for your question. I will translate for Dr. Fang. 方老师啊，方老师，这个问题是问您的。他说他对您介绍的中国的这个白丝带的活动非常感兴趣。然后他应该是来自哪儿的忘了。然后他说他就想问您一下，您开展了这么多活动，不知道这个比如说白丝带热线或这些干预活动，对于这个减少性别暴力或者减少家庭暴力有什么样的效果呢？就从数量上看有没有减少啊，或者是怎么样的？不知道您对这个有什么判断？有效果。
有的时候这个效果可能一个国家或者说一个城市的性别暴力数量和家庭暴力的数量很难通过一个机构的这样的一个工作来评估哈。但是呢，我们相信我们接触到的人群会有很多的改变，比如说我们针对施暴者的那个团体辅导小组，我们前测和后测的效果是非常明显的。然后呢，我们有热线的，我们的热线也对于这个来咨询的人的做了一些回访，也显示呢这个家庭暴力的处理家庭暴力的能力有了很大提升。但是你如果说就在我们的服务范围之内吧，我们接触的人群，我们能够看到一个明显的改变和效果，但是我们没有办法评估说它对于一个国家或者一个社会到底能够有多大的数据上的改变，这个我们还也评估不了，也没有，也确实也没有做这个，没有能力来做这个，
Thank you for your questions. And actually, for you're asking for about the results or the impact of our program. I think from the quantitative side, because if it's like coverage, it's difficult to evaluate the results of one agency's work. For the country, I mean, the reduction of the number of GBV cases of domestic violence in China, it's hard to say that. But we did have the assessment of the people we reached. That has been definitely reduced the risks of GBV. For example, we conducted counseling workshop for the perpetrators and also for the victims. And we do the pre and post assessment. We see the great results impact among these people. And we also have the hotlines. We have the revisit of these people, and they also, their capacity of anti-domestic violence has been greatly enhanced. So it's hard to say the contribution of our program to the country, but I can definitely say that they really changed the people we served. Yeah, thank you.
Well, great. Now we can open up the discussion considering the presentation, the experiences that were shared by Marcela, Lungu, and by Alessandra. We would love to, also presenters also engage in a conversation among each other if you want, and also participants, if you have not only questions but also reflections. We can have a moment, the remaining time that we have for this session, for critical reflections on what you heard. Also, you want to share a little bit about what you are doing in your country for engaging men and boys on gender justice, on prevention of violence, and how that resonate with the experiences we heard from our presenters. That also would be great. So the floor is for all of us. You can either raise your hand and request to speak up, or you can also write your reflections on the chat, or questions as well. I would say, for instance, that I am curious about the concept of men taking an active role in efforts to prevent and to respond to violence, to gender-based violence. And we heard that from the presentations. In some cases, in some presentations, I heard the expression men as champions, male gender champions, or something along those lines. And there have been some concerns about using this language of men as champions, because that might reinforce the idea that men are the leaders, the saviors of all problems. So it might reinforce patriarchy, even though in this case the concept of male champion is for an important good cause of ending violence. So there might be a contradiction there, and I would like to invite our presenters. How are you dealing with male leadership when because in all your programs men have to take a stand, a public stand, and lead. So how can you do that without reinforcing the patriarchal image of men as the leaders, of the solvers of all the problems?
Can I go first? Oh, yes. Also.
Yes, we go ahead, Marcela. We only see your eyes and you.
It's my camera again. There.
Yes.
I think you know, when I'm talking about the Tanzanian experience. When you look at the issues of gender-based violence, or the issue of gender has been left behind for women. It is taking up as if there's the women agenda, and for a couple of time now, men have been left behind. Now, when you put on front these men that this is the women agenda, but you can take it as your agenda, I think that is why we're trying to. No, it's like we try as well. Which, when you look at the community, when you go to the community, this is seen as the women issue. This is taken as the women agenda. But when we talk about gender-based violence, now here we're talking about the female and male. Because at the end of the day, when we talk about this issue, there are other men who came up and disclosed that we also go through gender-based violence, but we did not know that this is also the issues for men. So giving them the role, of course, there's that issue of patriarchy. Like we are still trying to appraising that there's this issue of patriarchy. That is very true, because a number of feminists have come up with saying that we don't want the issues of men engaged, but we're saying that these men are not coming up to take space for women. These men are not coming up to take lead on women's space, but they're also coming up showing the world that although we are perpetrators, because we look at the GBV, men are the perpetrators, but we can also champion attracting other men that this is wrong. But we could also be so. A source of increase. So that is the issue we're trying to bring. Although I'm agreeing with you that it's very challenging, because the whole issue of feminism coming up and saying that no, this is the issue for women. Why are we bringing men up? But slowly we are trying to educate the community, the feminists. But at the end of the day, when you look at the approach, men are left behind. Yeah.
Thank you, Marcela.
Hello. Yeah.
May I?
Please, Dr. Fang.
Thank you. 在中国，我们的工作中也是这样的一个感受，就是特别难的推动男性参与到这样的性别平等的工作中，是特别难的。尤其是志愿者的工作就是更难。这个时候呢，我觉得最主要的是能够把我们的工作和他内在的一些个诉求，比如说他自己的事业的规划呀，还有自己的生活的规划呀，结合起来就会更好。比如说顾伟，他之所以能够一直很积极的参与的，和他呢，因为他当时是个施暴者嘛，然后他的伴侣跟他离婚了，他一直想复婚，所以呢，他积极的参与到这个反家暴的工作中。我觉得和这个触动他，找到他这个点很重要。另外呢，也有一些人呢，他是觉得投入到家暴中，他 原来的青少年时代的创伤他自己可能是个原生家庭父母暴力的受暴者，那么他现在参与到这个过程中，他能够疗愈自己的创伤。还有的人呢，在这个工作当中增加了他工作的能力增加了他职业的声望我觉得这些都是一些就是找到他职业或者生活的一些个结合起来，跟他自己的诉求结合起来这是我们的一个经验愿意跟各位分享。另外，我想问一下刚才那位欧洲女士的那个问题就是这个远见，我想知道他现在使用者多数几乎都是男人在监控伴侣吗？还是也有女性来监控男人的，或者是一个什么样更多有没有这样方面的这个数字？哪一个各自的数字？好，谢谢。任老师。
Okay, I would like to share our experience regarding the male leadership in the male involvement and GBV. Actually, I totally agree with the Marcela's point that is actually in China, it's also a big challenge for us to promote male involvement because it's always say GBV, violence against domestic violence, also always women's issues. Men has no role in it, especially in our work, because we really depends on the volunteers. You know, we have China White Ribbon Network, it's a volunteers network. So how to involve the male volunteers involved in the volunteers work? I think it's our experience that you should identify the motivations, why they are interested in it, to be combined this GBV prevention into their own motivations. We notice that we invite some perpetrators, they become volunteers because, for example, like Mr. Gu Wei, his motivation is because of the domestic violence, his wife divorced with him. He want to be remarried, get married, get his wife back. That's the reason he want to seek help from our organizations and then participate in activities to get some support. So that's motivation. But other people, for example, they want to increase their capacity of counseling or communication with people. And some, they want to their career development. So it's important to identify this how to say it, the points they really touch them, and to combine with their own personal life and also their career development. That will be very helpful to encourage volunteers' participation. And I have one question for Alessandra. That is, Dr. Fang has one question for you. You mentioned about the stalkerware. Who are these users of this stalkerware? I mean, the apps. They are all, what is percentage, men or women? Do you have these figures?
That's a very good and interesting question. Tech industry do not have disaggregated data for their consumers. So we don't have a figure on who is downloading the stalkerware in terms of downloading it sort of officially. However, for sure, empirically, we are hearing about situations of stalkerware being used in situations of domestic violence. So we are having survivors that are talking about the fact that they have been victims of stalkerware, and to a lesser extent, we are beginning to collect information also from the perpetrator programs.
Okay, noted. Many thanks. I will translate to Dr. Fang. Thank you.
There is also a question for Alessandra that we left at the beginning, clarifying about the concept of cyber harassment as a separate category, and also there is this other concept of cyber stalking.
Yes, I wouldn't really argue pro or con the different categories of cyber stalking. I mean, some authors have categorized it this way, and so for sort of providing some ideas on how they can be divided. But I think that it was a fair objection that was done. Why certain behaviors are harassment and stalking are relatively similar behaviors. So I wouldn't really make a strong argument for that that category, those categories.
Excellent, thank you. Other questions, other reflections based on the experience that you heard from our three panelists, or experiences in your own countries that you want to share here, and also perhaps our panelists can reflect on your experiences working with men and boys in your own settings. I see someone ask for how to reach out to some of you. I think the ways to reach out to you are in the Ubuntu app as well. So, for instance, another interesting experience, shared experiences that two of you mentioned was about working with perpetrators. In Alessandra's presentation was mentioned also. Dr. Fang mentioned about working with perpetrators, and that has been a very contentious model of work among some feminist thinkers and activists, and raising the question whether working with perpetrators really produce results, and whether we should invest more on what Dr. Fang was mentioning about prevention and communication and working with youth. So and the difficulty to really measure impact in the work with perpetrators. So if you have some additional thoughts or explanation about why working with perpetrators, it's an important piece. I mean, Alessandra, I think, may put it in that way. It's an important component of the whole struggle for ending gender-based violence.
Well, I think that there's a number of very strong arguments that can be made in favor of working with perpetrators, starting from the fact that often perpetrators are serial. So even if one woman separates, then they might be violent with the next one and with the next one. So you have to intervene. They have to go, that some change has to happen because they're fathers. And so we're working on intergenerational violence. It's not only about readdressing the violence in one particular situation, but it's also about providing a different model for the children that are being raised in a violent situation. Also, there's a third issue that I think is linked to a community-oriented, victim-focused approach that has a feminist agenda, and that is that it has to do partially with the program that is delivered, but that's a part. It's a small part of what perpetrator programs do. It's also about keeping men that have been violent against their partners accountable for the violence. So it's making it visible. So very many times in situations of violence, all the focus is on the victim, but in some ways also the responsibility. She has to leave. She has to take care of the children. She has to find a job. So the burden, she has to press charges. All the burden of solving a situation of violence is on the victim, even though she's the victim of the situation. And the burden of changing the situation should be on who is being violent, not on who is receiving the violence. So perpetrator programs is also about that. It's about enforcing also legal systems so that the judicial system, the legal system, can not be blindsided by the fact that the perpetrator, that is the one doing the damage, also often becomes invisible to the system. And so this is a very, that's where secondary traumatization on victims happens. That's a lot of the unfairness of gender-based violence happens within the courtrooms, within the system, that is not able to hold the perpetrator accountable and to make sure that there are differences in the way victims are accepted and are taken in by the system and the way perpetrators are. So I think that we need to closely collaborate. Perpetrator programs need to be tight allies of women's support services and feminist groups that are linked and focused on women's rights. But it's not only, and it's not primarily about helping men stop their violence. It's also about helping men stop their violence, but even more, it's about holding them supporting the system in holding men accountable. And I think that's a really important part of social change. I think in many countries, for sure, I speak for Italy and many other European countries, one of the major problems is that the systems are not holding men accountable. In Italy, 93% of women don't press charges. And why don't they press charges? Partly because it's complex, partly because sometimes they don't want to cause harm to their partners, but also because they know that the systems are not accountable and that they will not be protected. And this is a and that's part of what holding men accountable is. And I think that's part of what the mission of perpetrator programs is. So I think also for this reason, it's an important ally.
Thank you, Alessandra, for that true response, very clear response on the importance of working with perpetrators and organizing, designing, and delivering perpetrators program. I wonder if Dr. Fang has an opinion based on the experience that you, Dr. Fang, has on organizing these perpetrators programs.
方老师，您也说两句。
好的，谢谢主持人。在中国以往确实针对施暴者的工作也非常少见，主要是针对受暴者的。但是在我们的工作中呢，我们会觉得为什么需要针对施暴者做工作呢？主要有这样几个原因。第一个呢，就是确实有很多的施暴者他自己非常希望改变，不管他因为什么原因，他非常渴望能够不再做施暴者啊。第二点呢，就是受暴者很多人也希望施暴者改变啊，他们不想离婚啊，也希望能够各种原因吧，不想希望施暴者改变，那么婚姻可以更幸福。第三点呢，我们相信呢，施暴者本身他也是一个受害者，因为他既是原生家庭暴力的受害者，也是他自己暴力的受害者，因为自己的暴力呢破坏了他的想要的幸福婚姻，他可能原来也想要婚姻啊，这是我们说的也是改变的一个必要。另外还有一点呢，就是前面那个欧洲女士好像也提到了，就是代际传承的问题啊，他改变了他的孩子就可以不再传承暴力。有的施暴者他特别有力量去改变，说我一定要改变，他其中一个理由就是说，我不想让我的孩子再重复我这样的充满暴力的不幸福的婚姻了啊！所以我们看到基于这样几个理由呢，我们觉得这个施暴者的工作还是很有价值的，而且呢，至少我们针对轻微的暴力的施暴者的辅导能够达到明显的效果。谢谢林老师。
So why we think perpetrators program is important? Because in China, as Europe, also in the other countries, the GBV or domestic violence program are always victim-centered, always focus on the victims. But for me, I think perpetrators program are also important because I really see the needs are there. Because I saw some of the perpetrators, they also want to change. They don't want to continue this violence. They want marriage. They want their partners. They want wife back. So they want to change. And also for some victims, they also need their perpetrators change because they are lovers. They for many reasons. So that's the needs from the people. And secondly, I think the perpetrators in some way they themselves are also the victims in some way, because they are the violence, but they also destroy their life. They didn't have a happy life when they live in a violence environment. They want to have happy marriage. Sometimes they always want have a family, live together with their wife, but because violence, the wife divorced or something. So that's in some way they are also paying from this violence. And the third point, I totally agree with Alessandra's point, that is generation issues, because most of the perpetrators, they always continued to their children. They also have violence against their children. So there will be continued. So I think it makes sense and also valuable for this perpetrator program. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Fang, for your response, for your reflections. Others participants, attendants in the session or panelists, please also feel free to engage in dialogue with your colleagues, panelists.
So maybe if there are not other questions, I was interested also in knowing a little bit more about the group that Dr. Fang did, I think with children that witnessed the violence, or with adults that had witnessed violence in their childhood. Mentioned something in the presentation about that, and I wanted to ask a bit more. I was also interested in the children's book that they developed, what kind of content was in the children's book. And and the last, I guess, is more related to the perpetrator programs, what kind of content they had, what kind of structure they had, and
Okay, I will translate to Dr. Fang. 方老师，我给您翻译一下啊，他还有问题问你，有3个问题。第一个就是您提到了一个教育是吧？就是那个培训哈，就是对这个施暴的，他对这个挺感兴趣，您可以简单的跟他说一下。第二个就是他对您提到的一个儿童的绘本很感兴趣，他想问一下您这个绘本的内容是什么？第3个问题就是也是想让您多介绍一下，因为他们也是做施暴者干预的，所以他想问您一下，您现在做的施暴者干预的主要的内容和方法是什么？
好，那前面第一个我没太听懂，就是培训是指针对咨询师的那个培训是吧？
不是，好像是那个教育的，青少年教育的。
哦，青少年教育培训，好的，谢谢您。好，谢谢您的问题。针对那个青少年教育的呢，我们主要是把它放到性教育里面啊，在性教育呢，通常更多的是说，一般人的理解吧，是更多的性的生理知识教育，但是我们觉得呢，性的教育当中也一定要包括性别平等，包括亲密关系的教育，所以呢，在我们的这个单纯的性生理啊、青春期生理啊这些教育之外呢，我们会把性别平等放进去，也把反家暴放进去，哈，让孩子们从小就知道这个。家庭暴力是不好的，还是不能接受的。那么我们会有课程啊，我们会有一些设计成一些课件啊，一些课程啊，做这样的教育哈。绘本呢是我们针对3到6岁孩子的绘本，其中有3本绘本，一个绘本呢，就讲的是那个。就是借用一个动物的形象吧，就企鹅哈，企鹅的形象，然后把这个家暴的一些知识啊、观点啊都融合进去哈。还有一个绘本也是关于用的熊猫啊，用的熊猫的形象，比如说森林里头这一家的熊猫家里总打架呀，那一家怎么样？你看你怎么翻译一下啊？就是用小故事的形式吧。还有一个绘本呢，我们就是用顾伟他们的故事，顾伟家里的故事，因为顾伟跟他妻子离婚了，然后他的孩子总希望他的爸妈能够在一起，为什么你们总不在一起哈？就是用这样的绘本的形式来跟孩子普及家庭暴力的知识概念，然后施暴者辅导呢，我们现在是设计的30次的辅导的30个主题的辅导内容，它主要包括几个板块，一个是认识家庭暴力啊，澄清家暴的迷思，一个是反思男性气质对自己的影响， 还有呢就是学会处理这个高危的这个情景啊，就是对一些心理疏导吧，还有一些学习成长的，总之就是30个内容的设计，反正说起来比较麻烦，您可以大致的说，就是涉及到他的性别意识提升情绪的处理。特别要强调一下他对于暴力的认识啊，反思暴力的认识，包括让他自己反思在原生家庭当中他自己受暴的过程啊，这样促进他的觉悟啊，大致这意思，应该够了吧？可以吧，刘老师
？Okay, Alessandra, thank you for your questions. We'll briefly answer your questions. You have 3 questions for Dr. Fang. I think first question is about their adolescent education. Is that your question? I think because most of sexuality education in China focus on the biological knowledge or reproductive knowledge, information like contraceptives. And for their sexuality education, integrated the concepts of gender equality and also the domestic violence into this comprehensive program. So they think this should be integrated part of it. For example, like what is domestic violence? What type of violence it is? To help the children and adolescents to recognize, because sometimes they have no idea about it's really a violence. And then the second is the second question is about the children's book. Actually, the children's book, they have developed 3 books already, and they targeted children aged 3 to 6. And they used the image of some animals like panda or pigeon that is loved by the children to tell the stories of domestic violence, and like why the parents, the mother and the father always quarrel, and etc. And mainly to increase the awareness of the children, what is violence, what is domestic violence, how they can respond to that, why it's happened. And some children's story, one story is from the real story. They mentioned a perpetrator champion, Gu story, because they divorced and his children always want them, a father and mother, back together again. So this is some from the real story. And then for the third question is about the Perpetrators Program. Actually, this is a training program for perpetrators, and they have developed a very complicated training courses for them. They have about 30 topics, and they think the most important to make them to recognize what is a violence behaviors, because sometimes they have no ideas. These are violence, and then to help them how to change their behaviors, how to control themselves, how to respond when they feel angry, etc. So that's the main purpose. Yeah, thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much. I have a question for Marcela and also for Dr. Fang and Alessandra regarding if you can share one lesson learned, something that you perhaps in your programming were not successful at the beginning, and then you realize we need to change this in order to be effective. I'm thinking, for instance, in my experience working in my home country, in Nicaragua, when we started doing this work with men and boys, our approach was very much centered on only focus on men recognizing the violence, which is very important, of course, but we failed to. Actually, the name of our group was Men Against Violence. We were very much focused on the problem and not much imagining and naming what is the new reality that we wanted to create in terms of men's identities and men's relationships with others, with women and with other men. That's just one example of how we needed to, at some point, we started changing the way that we present ourselves. And I'm wondering if you have any to share regarding something that you started doing it in this direction, but then you shift direction in order to make it more effective, or because there were some consequences that you didn't anticipate. And once you realize that's what's happening, you learn from that and shift with another approach. Could be something very detailed or something more greater, whatever. If there is something along those lines that
thank you very much. Yeah.
Yes, Marcela.
Thank you very much. I mean, also, first of all, was the issues of just engaging men alone without women. As I said, alongside there are women who are selling, who are doing who are entrepreneurs along the coffee hubs. But then at first, our focus was just with men. There's this day we went to the dialogue. Then there's this other group of women saying that we really, really wish to be part of that session. So for us, we said, why not engaging women in the hubs? But we were the community, not the people living there, saying that these are places for men. As I said before, women are not allowed to be here. But also, as I've said, when we engage men, but the other thing that's why men support this program is that we help them in the economic, we empower men economically because we buy these coffee from them and the snacks. But we also realize that what about the women who are selling who are vendors, who are nearby the coffee hub? So one of the things that we change is that whenever we're engaging men into this dialogue, there will be a woman selling. Continue, but also one thing is that there are a number of good stories that we heard from these men. We would really wish to document the stories. That's where we started to engage media, so that the world, the world or the people out there can see that men can really be championing in this agenda. So the two things that we changed is that we started engaging women. Even in as I've said, the project is ongoing in the other districts that we are working currently. Actually, currently we are working on the issue of how do we increase women participation on the issues of peace and security and the issues of conflict reconciliations from the community level. But we're also engaging men in this agenda. Now, in this agenda that we're working on, through the same approach, we have both male and female discuss and plan together. We see this is really, really working. So first thing was that I'm focusing on men alone and leaving behind the women while there are other women around the community. That was something that we learned and changed, but also the documenting of all these good stories so that media can show what's been happening and how can men be part of this program. Yeah. Thank you very much.
If I were to say one thing about the approach that we changed, it's we learned about how to talk to men about violence in terms of engaging men that might have violent behavior. We learned from them. We worked with them. We tried to understand what would have worked, what didn't work. We went over campaigns, many zero tolerance campaigns, which are very wrong ways of talking with men and engaging men, because they are usually very stereotypes and sort of in the way they are portraying violence, with black eyes and a very very extreme and polarized way of seeing violence. Men are often either the monsters or they are not absent or they're not there. I remember there was one campaign in which there was a couple and there was no face on the man. So there are all things that depersonalize and that don't relate to how men feel. Even men that are being violent, they don't feel like they are the violent monster that the communication portrays them of. So we learned that to talk to men, we need to talk about everyday violence. We need to talk about recognizable violence. We need to talk about the small gestures that we have in common that are part of our heritage, and that you can actually, they are close enough and recognizable enough that you are able to engage with them and say, yes, this is something that actually maybe I do. I can see how this can be damaging for somebody. So we need to really shift the way we address violence.
Thank you.
Also, obviously, I mean, the organization is called Work with Perpetrators, but like the worst thing in the world is sticking with something like perpetrators and sort of these terms that are generally overarching. I mean, there's a long, the reasons for which we still have this name, but in terms of engaging men, that's an extremely bad idea. Extremely ineffective.
Thank you for that critical reflection about how we need to, the language that we use to reach out to men and boys should be a language that engage them, invite them, not push them away. Okay, not sure if Dr. Fang, we only have 9 minutes left, but I also want to give the chance to Dr. Fang if he has a reflection on this, on lessons learned, on things that you did in the past that didn't work, and now you are changing, you made some changes based on those learnings to reach your goals better, to really contribute to engaging men and boys on violence prevention and gender equality.
那个方老师 ，sorry， 方老师他想大家最后做一个总结，就是听听您就是通过您的项目有什么教训，吸取什么教训？您觉得哪方面就是做的不是特别好，可以以后可以继续就是吸取什么教训跟大家分享一下？就这个，刚才他们几个人都提的是这个。
好，是让他们先说吧，我等会儿说，我想一下。
他们都说完了，他们刚才说就是他们的教训。
就是教训哈，
对。有什么哪方面不太成功的，就这意思。
就是我觉得呢，对于我们来说，其实最大的一个问题还是可持续性，也不能说完全没有可持续性，但是还达不到理想的效果。比如说，我们有的时候培训100名这样的心理咨询师啊，然后呢，但是实际上最后可能能够他们一直在这领域做工作的呢，可能也就剩下1年之后剩20个，2年之后剩5、6个啊。然后我们早期的志愿者，比如说2013年，我们当时的志愿者呢特别活跃的，我们到了去年年底统计呢，只剩下5、6个啊。当时可能50、60人，剩下5、6个，过了6、7年，我觉得这是一个挺大的问题啊。当然这也是和怎么说呢，就是说。也是和这种可持续呢，也是和一个有社会的原因哈，有个人的很多原因，但是从我们做工作的角度来讲，怎么能够这个不是当时很热闹，然后过后就慢慢的就淡化了哈，这是一个挺遗憾的事情啊，也是我们需要一起思考的。您看这样可以吗，任老师？
行。I think the lessons learned, or even a big challenge for our work during past 10 years, that is how to ensure the sustainability of our program. Because we face a big challenge because we are purely volunteers network. So some people, they like 10 years ago, they are the volunteers, but like we train 50, 60 people, but after several years, it's only still 1%, 10% still working, but 90% they have left for many reasons, for different reasons. So we are thinking maybe it's a lessons learned for us. We should, when we design a program and implement our activities, we should think about the sustainability, how to sustain, how to make it sustained. I think that's the lessons learned. Thank you.
Very important consideration. I think many of us, or all of us, also struggle with keeping alive our efforts, and I want to also highlight that what you have been telling us, Dr. Fang, to base on volunteers. So this means that these are people who are really committed to this. They are not looking for rewards, for material reward, but they are really feeling the need for contributing to a better society, to better families, communities. I think that's an important part to highlight and as a source of inspiration. I want to take the last 5 minutes to thank you all for being part of this session. I think we learned a lot. There are some materials as well that have been offered by our panelists for us to continue learning more. This session will be available as a recording, and I encourage you to also disseminate this session. So thank you again to all of you.